Yes. I'll call this meeting of September 21st to order. Dr. Cash will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas noches. Si alguien en el público llegará a necesitar los aparatos para escuchar la interpretación simultánea, los tenemos disponibles. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. We have headsets for the hearing impaired. If you need one, let staff know. Introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions. Dr. Cash?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Back to school nights are continuing to happen throughout our district with La Cuesta OAS, Goleta Valley Junior High School, and La Cumbra is being held this Thursday, September 24th. And then our final back to school night is on September 29th at Santa Barbara Junior High School. And I've attended several of those. They've all been great. The ones I've been to and the reports I've received from staff that have been out they've just been fantastic nights, great welcoming for parents. Just for our public and a reminder to our board that we have a special board meeting with the Goleta Union School District Board of Education that's scheduled for September 30th, starting at 2 p.m., and it'll be right here in our district office. On October 1st, the Santa Barbara Education Foundation is sponsoring my annual State of Our Schools address that will be held at Fess Parker. And I'll also be presenting the same State of Our Schools address in Spanish at the Franklin Elementary School in October at a date to be determined. Where I'm not certain it's going to be the date we originally agreed to. It might be another date, but we'll get that to you as quickly as we can get that squared away. I also want to announce a really exciting and important opportunity, and that's our iLearn Summit that we are hosting at Santa Barbara Junior High School on October 23rd and 24th. I have a really exciting keynote speaker, Saba Quidwa, who's the Director of Innovative Learning for the Keck School of Medicine at the greatest university in the world, the University of Southern California. Her talk is called, "Are You Indispensable? Creating a Culture of Innovation." So we have many of our own tech coaches will be presenting, as well as our teachers at that workshop. I have to say that I sent the information, the flyer out today to our surrounding districts, and I heard back from several superintendents about how excited they were to send teachers to our iLearn Summit. And with that, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Mr. Herron, may I just ask a quick question on that? In terms of the iLearn Summit, when does it open for non-Santa Barbara Unified registration?
Immediately.
It's open now? Even if you're not a... Great.
The charter school has been notified.
Yes.
Yes.
Board comments and correspondence. Board comments and correspondence. I report on the Adelante board meeting that I attended. They did approve and agree to the FUA and signed it, and I signed it, and I think it's been on its way and met the deadline. Thank you very much for negotiating the final wording in the document, and they were very happy, very pleased, and wanted me to say thank you to the staff and Meg for getting that done. It took 8 months or so, but it was a good, healthy discussion. I think everybody learned a lot in the process for future. They came end of the year with a very healthy budget surplus, so it'll go a long way in helping to purchase or move the 2 portables onto their property, so they're very happy about that too. Obviously, the big event of the week was the Adams Library dedication. A rock was dedicated to none other than Kate Parker. And
Kind of rock.
Of course, it was a rock dedication. It was wonderful and well-deserved, Ms. Parker. And that was a 15 to 17-year project, so thank you very much for your dedication to that. I went to a Kiwanis luncheon honoring Teen Court, and a well-attended luncheon. One of the highlights that I heard was that 87% of the people that go through Teen Court are still clear of any infractions after 6 months. So they were very proud of their track record, that they're succeeding doing things. Ms. Wagonette was there too. It was just a very, very pleasant event honoring, not honoring, but Ed Q put it on, who's been involved, and Judge Adams. It was just it was a nice, friendly atmosphere, and a lot of awards, and very nicely done. Saturday was the Day of Caring by United Way, and I'd like to make sure we give our thanks to United Way. 11 of our schools participated. I visited 9 of them, and it was really a pleasure to see Westmont College at Franklin in full force. What they did in one morning, it would take a gardening staff or our staff months to accomplish, just in cleaning. And the same thing happened with Don's Net Cafe at Monroe and Adams. Full force. When you see piles of mulch and wheelbarrows and everybody hands on knees pulling weeds, and families, kids, adults, the whole, just to watch it, every one of the schools, so much going on in one morning. I mean, it defies my imagination why every one of our schools doesn't take advantage of that one morning. They got stuff done that probably would never get done in the normal course of the school year. So it's 1,100, 1,200 people volunteering for that one morning across the city of Santa Barbara. So that completes my activities, and we will now go on to public comments. Do we have any? Oh, announcement of closed session items. We had one item, no action was taken, that's reportable. Now we'll go to announcements of public comments. No? No. One other thing I just remembered, we did go, Dr. Paz and myself went to the special education CPAC committee meeting, and it was a good group of people at that, and very healthy discussion by everybody. DA, acceptance of donations.
I'd like to move to accept donations for September 21st, 2015 with gratitude.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Consent agenda. Any items to be held over?
I'd like to pull item E10.
Which one?
E10.
E10, the approval of the Wolf Science Camp contract for the 15-16 school year.
Any others? Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make the motion to approve the consent items minus item E10.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Was E10 a discussion item or a point of interest item?
I think I'd like to leave it toward the end.
Okay.
Let's give it a few minutes.
We have no public hearing. Item F. We go to G1, approval of Resolution 2015-16-09 in support of recognition of October as Dyslexia Awareness Month.
Would ask our Assistant Superintendent for Special Education, Helen Rodriguez, to present this.
Good evening, Board President Ed Herron, board members, Superintendent Dr. Cash, and cabinet members. It gives me great pleasure to present the resolution in support of recognition of October as National Dyslexia Awareness Month. Resolution in support of recognition of October as National Dyslexia Awareness Month, whereas Santa Barbara Unified School District recognizes that our children are our most valuable resource and we must provide opportunities for all students to learn and grow. Whereas the United States Department of Health defines dyslexia as an inheritable and highly prevalent language-based disability affecting 1 in 5 individuals. Whereas dyslexia, meaning difficulty with words, is one of the several distinct learning disabilities and is characterized by challenges in processing language when decoding oral and written words. Whereas dyslexia deeply affects a student's ability to read, write, spell, and comprehend and may always affect a student's overall well-being. whereas students with dyslexia, especially those who are not identified and are reading below grade level at the end of 3rd grade, often experience difficulties with depression, anxiety, and poor self-image, and rarely catch up to their peers, and as a result, underperform in school and are at a greater risk for dropping out. Whereas with proper identification, appropriate instruction, accommodation, access to assistive technologies, support from families, teachers, and friends, individuals with dyslexia can excel in school and employment. Whereas our school district works to inform and empower families and educators with the most current research-based practices to promote literacy development and to prepare students for a hopeful and productive future. Whereas our school district recognizes the many gifts and strengths associated with dyslexia, including entrepreneurship, creative thinking, and excellence in the arts and sports. Whereas in an effort to assist parents, educators, and individuals, the International Dyslexia Association has designated October as Dyslexia Awareness Month. Therefore, be it resolved that the Santa Barbara Unified School District Board of Education does hereby proclaim October 2015 Dyslexia Awareness Month in the Santa Barbara Unified School District and encourages staff members, families, and the community to collaborate to raise awareness and understanding in so much as to identify, treat, and prevent problems associated with dyslexia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Board?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve that.
I will second that.
Under discussion, I'll just comment that thank you for putting this on the agenda. When we look at the numbers, 20% of our children out of 15,000, that's about 3,000 theoretically, are concerned with this, obviously. It's interesting that we now have Sherry Ray, who I don't see her here, but I know she's very involved and working very hard with the Resource Center on the issue. I know we had Joan Esposito for years, very involved and very working on it. Thanks. A lot of her information is in the Resource Center, so it's it's good. I passed on to Dr. Cash something that Joan Esposito gave me when she retired that I had forgotten I had. But 25 years ago, this district had a task force looking at dyslexia, and they gave a report with 12 or 15 action items. I would hope during this month, and where it talks about getting staff members involved, family, community, that maybe somebody can take a look at that report from 25 years ago to see what we have accomplished, what still needs to be accomplished, what didn't get accomplished. You know, and right now, 56% of our students who are special ed students have some type of specific learning disability, which a great majority probably are dyslexia. And it's just something that I think we need to raise the level a little bit and just try a little harder. I know that we are really emphasizing preschool, younger ages, before 3rd grade. I think we're doing a heck of a lot to hit it earlier in life so that they don't get to 3rd grade and can't read. And so I think we should be commended, and Dr. Cash should be commended for taking that step to take it down to a lower level to catch these things early on. If you can get it before 3rd grade, we won't have a problem in later years. So it's well worth the effort and the time and energy to do it. So thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. G2, approval of supplemental education services, SES, provider contracts for the 15-16 school year.
Well, this is an item that's required by Title I, and Fran Wagenik's here to present it.
So each year, we put together a list of service providers that are available to provide services to our students who qualify in our schools that are program improvement year 2 and beyond. So we're presenting to you the contract as well as the list of providers for 2015-16.
Any questions? Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the supplemental education services provider contracts for the 15-16 school year.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much. G3, approval of naming of the theater building at San Marcos High School.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We have David Hetjunk here and a whole host of the principal and teachers from San Marcos High School here to support this item. So I'll ask Mr. Hetjunk to come forward.
Thank you, Dr. Cash, members of the board. It's always exciting when a principal gives you a call and has news of, again, people in this community being very generous and donating to the district. In this case, it's the Marquis family, Dale and Matt and their family, which wish to donate to the theater building at San Marcos High School and have it named the Marquis Performing Arts Center. Principal Behrens and I and Matt met. We talked about types of things that the school would like to see done for the theater, and there is an attachment to the agenda item that contains those items, and I'll let Ed say a few words about what this family has done for San Marcos High School.
The Marquis family has been really integral in many things. They've had several kids who have gone through the Performing Arts program at San Marcos High School. Matt is an alumni of San Marcos High School, and he helped start the Royal Pride Foundation at San Marcos High School. He's one of our founding board members, and they're a founding family, and just has been great in helping out San Marcos in so many ways. And we've been talking for a while about the potential of doing a naming, and this year it came to fruition. So I want to recognize Dale and Matt Marquis for their generosity to hopefully name the San Marcos High School auditorium.
With that, I'll turn it over to the board and if they have any questions.
Ms. Parker?
Well, the name is so oddly, incredibly apropos. It worked out really nicely. I think it's delightful. I think it's wonderful when a family is involved for so long and then steps forward in this way to make sure that this is a program that continues on into the future and helps generations of students to come. We all know that arts is always at risk, and it always is just the next down cycle in the educational economy that can damage a program. And so it's wonderful to see the community step forward in this way in this particular family, and I'm certainly all for it. Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about removing the one sign that's there and put up a new sign? It says removing the digital signboard and then putting up a new digital signboard.
The marquee that is up on the side of the theater is no longer functional.
Oh,
and so
okay.
it will be replaced with a new marquee at a new location, I believe. They're talking about the location.
Yes. We actually tried to replace the lights, and the company that originally installed it doesn't even have replacement lights for that marquee anymore, so it's pretty much obsolete.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Board?
I have a question. On the outside, say driving past, will there be a noticeable difference? Are we looking at different colors or anything large to be changed?
It'll say the Marquis Performing Arts Center.
Okay.
That'll be kind of the noticeable difference from the outside. Most of the other items will not be noticeable from the outside, but when you go in the foyer, there will probably be a definite noticeable difference, and the signage. So a lot of if you'll note, a lot of the items are not just exterior type beautification items.
Ms. Limon?
Well, I just want to say thank you. I think that this is a big investment, and I'm looking forward to seeing the new marquee with the Marquis family name on it. So, thank you.
Mr. Paz?
Likewise,
Dr. Paz?
thank you on behalf of the board for your dedication to the kids in Santa Barbara and for really trying to make it a better place for all kids in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you for your lengthy giving to this community. I mean, this is part of it, but over the years, it's been tremendous, so thank you very much. Do you have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the naming of the theater building at San Marcos High School, the Marquee Center for Performing Arts.
I'll second it.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously with a big thank you.
Yay.
I don't know that the vocal group can get much better. The madrigals are, I don't know what you can do to make them even better, but... And I have to say that your group was at the Day of Caring, and it's always a delight to hear them and hear the Dos Pueblos drum line coming in, so it was beautiful.
Congratulations and thank you to the Marquee family.
G4, approval of variable term waiver.
This is a human resources item, and Mitch Torina is here.
President Herron, esteemed board members, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing permits districts to credential teachers using a variable term waiver. These types of credentials can cover statewide shortage areas. They are typically used when no other type of credential can be issued by the CTC. The board is required to approve the waivers as an action item before the CTC acts at one of their regularly scheduled meetings. And the district is requesting the board approve the following variable term waiver, the adaptive PE teacher. This is actually an extension from the waiver this teacher had last year for a semester. We are confident that the candidate in this position will complete his credential requirements. Anthony Linebaugh is an experienced PE teacher and coach. He has willingly accepted to teach an additional period of adaptive PE at San Marcos High School. He currently holds a clear multiple subject credential and is board approved each year to PE-based on Education Code 44258. He has a master's in coaching and athletic administration. He is a certified strength and conditioning specialist, is a member of the NCA and SCA, the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and the Positive Coaching Alliance, and is enrolling in the adaptive PE program at Fresno Pacific University. And in the beginning of this year in our hiring cycle, there was an area of shortage regarding our special ed teachers overall, specifically in the adaptive PE area. So we hope that the board considers this and approves. Questions?
No questions for me. I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Under discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. G5, discussion and approval of proposal from Santa Barbara High School pool quad surveillance from Quintron Systems.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is a matter that we've discussed for probably maybe a year and a half, 2 years now, about the idea of trying to do a pilot surveillance system at one of our high schools in Santa Barbara High. Stepped forward, I think, a year and a half ago, volunteering to be the school to try it out. And since then, both Mr. Rickman and Mr. Vizzolini in our facilities department have been diligently looking at various vendors. This is the one that we're bringing forward for your approval. And Dr. Drotti's here if you have any questions regarding Santa Barbara High School.
I think Dr. Cass gave me the intro already, so I'll go ahead and respond to any questions that you may have.
Ms. Idelson?
I'm just curious how those points were chosen, where the cameras would aim. Is that areas that are most problematic?
Yeah, and unfortunately, Mr. Beckier wasn't able to be here tonight, but when in communication with him, they recognized that was the highest, those two areas were the areas where there was most theft. So in all their attempts to try to resolve it, they thought that this was a great opportunity to see if the surveillance cameras can actually work.
So the pool and the quad outside the cafeteria?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Paz?
Just wanted to comment that I was happy to see that the company that was chosen is somewhat of a local company because their corporate offices are in Santa Maria. So I like that.
Well, also one other thing, will there be a need for much oversight of this? I mean, it sounded like it records for about 2 weeks, and then,
Yes. So the administration hopes to, I want to remind, this is a pilot, so a part of it is going to be see the feasibility of it and our ability to actually verify information. So they will be having oversight over what's being recorded.
Dr. Paz?
I'm just curious, do you know what their experience has been in other schools? I'm assuming that they have a bit of experience in other schools and sites.
They have extensive experience working with other schools, especially in the Santa Maria district.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any action?
I'd like to move for approval of the proposed Santa Barbara High School pool quad surveillance system from Quintron Systems.
I'll second that.
Under discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you.
We'll certainly report back to the board sometime this school year and let you know whether we would like to move forward and how it went.
G6, second reading, adoption of board policy and admin regulation 4112-4.41, employee drug testing.
This is back for a second reading with some clarification. There might be some additional questions. We're prepared to answer those, and Mr. Tureen is here to present it.
Well, the Santa Barbara Unified School District currently does not have policies implementing related to industry standards for safety-sensitive positions for drug and alcohol testing. We are bringing this forward to determine whether or not the board has interest in creating this policy for our staff. It's a pre-employment, just as a reminder.
Could you point out the one change from the last time we talked about this?
It should be in green. No. So in my research with currently our neighboring districts, it's specifically for them, those who are driving. So for some of our districts that have a bus system within the district, they are testing their drivers, their current drivers, any of the people who are driving district vehicles. And so when I asked how did they get that currently on, it's just a policy that they've had for a while.
Ms. Parker?
Could you clarify what you mean by district vehicle? Because, for example, all the secondary campuses have, those golf carts, for example.
Yeah, so that would be considered a vehicle of the district.
Right, so administrators, any secondary administrator, for example, would need to be drug tested.
Potentially if they are going onto a site that has a cart that they may be using for their job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had the same question, maybe a little different. This is a pre-employment. So we have staff that gets promoted. So if they go from one school that doesn't have a golf cart to a school that does have a golf cart and they are going to drive it, they're an employee already. Do they still have to go through this testing? Is it a change of...
We could change that, but...
I just wonder if it's change of job function, or once you're here and get promoted or change jobs, you're automatically exempted?
Exempt from the testing. That's how I would interpret it as it's written.
Yeah, it's pretty clear it's pre-employment. Yeah. So they're already an employee, they're just changing jobs.
But does every maintenance person, for instance, start work for us and immediately start driving vehicles? Or do they start driving vehicles as they progress in their job function?
I think it's both. Some are hired as and know that they will be driving, and others will move up from lower level positions into a possible driving position through maintenance.
Even if this is important, it will miss a lot of people.
We could miss a lot of people, yes.
Ms. Limon?
And so to follow up on that, I think one of the questions I had last time was just what kind of legal advice were we given? So since it is actually going to miss a lot of people, I hadn't even thought about the golf carts, and it's more than administrators that drive those. I mean, you go to the campuses and you see a whole lot of people driving golf carts, or that one or two golf carts on there. But why? I mean, has the advice been given to us that for legal reasons we really should only do pre-employment and not currently? I mean, if it's a dean?
No, that's just the tenor of the discussion from the last board meeting, and it's what we presented originally that prompted the limitation to pre-employment as opposed to employee drug testing. There's clearly a distinction between the two. These are people who are not yet hired versus people who currently work for us. So if the board would like us to engage in the same protocol for current employees who are driving district vehicles, then we would change the language in the AR.
I think for purposes of today, I would be fine with approving this as is. Maybe we'll just talk some more. I'm just curious. I don't fully feel like I understand maybe what changes if we're testing current employees that are driving cars versus pre. I feel like I'm missing something.
Well, from a safety standpoint, one might argue that any employee, any person, whether they are a current employee or a prospective applicant, should be tested if part of their job requires them to drive a district vehicle. There might be less tolerance for testing current employees than for applicants. So that's that we will do whatever you feel you would like to have as your policy in AR. So we've gone, our recommendation is based on non-employees applicants.
How many employees typically do we hire from day one that drive maintenance vehicles or golf carts?
Well, I know that our campus supervised camper safety folks would probably be one of the first people on receiving that position to be driving.
Do you want to know the number
I'm
or
just
the
curious,
names of positions?
do we have a lot of people who join us who from day one are going to be driving a vehicle?
Sure,
We do?
yeah,
Okay.
most everyone in the maintenance yard has a vehicle they drive to the work site.
Question. I think we asked the last time this was presented to the board how other school districts have approached this. Any insight in terms of current versus pre-employment?
They all have current considered with their current employees. So none of them have had to push something through for pre-employment. It's been existing for all the other HR representatives that I spoke with, and I spoke with Carpenter Rio, Ventura, Lompoc, and Goleta.
And for us, on a typical day, if someone is working in maintenance, and how many miles would they drive on a typical day?
Mr. Hetyan can come forward and answer that question.
I mean, I ask because I live downtown, I walk, and sometimes I do encounter people in our district vehicles.
Most of our vehicles are very low mileage, which is why in the maintenance department we typically don't lease, we buy, because we tend to keep them for over 20 years. Because you're driving, the faraway points for us to drive to are San Marcos High School and Dos Pueblos. You may consider La Colina a little ways, and Goleta Valley. And so you'll have vehicles that could spend 3 weeks without going outside the city limits, just going from the maintenance department to a couple schools, maybe back for supplies or equipment, or down to a vendor to pick up a part that's needed to fix a repair. So, you're talking maybe, I'd say if we put on 500-600 miles a month, and where typically you'd expect someone normally to drive around 1,000 miles a month on their vehicle. That's typically, if you look at the car leases, they're usually 36 months leases and 36,000 miles. We'd probably put on half that many miles.
I mean, this is a legal question that always probably comes up, but is there any legal liability? For instance, we test people for drugs who we know are going to be driving a vehicle when they join us, versus we don't test somebody for drugs if they've been with us and now start driving. I mean, are we open for a legal liability? Hey, you tested this guy before he joined you, but this guy who's with you is going to drive the same truck, but you don't test him. I mean, do we have any
Yeah, we will be legally liable for anyone who is under the influence, drives their vehicle and damages the vehicle or injures another person, whether the policy exists or not.
But at least if we've already had them drug tested, we got some defense. I mean, to some. We tried to stop it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is so much broader than I had originally been thinking, and I was looking at CARP, and the only position that they define for sure is bus drivers. And so I think I'm okay with the pre-employment piece, and certainly would want to have a lot of input from our unions about current testing and non-represented, if that were a direction that anybody was interested in going in. I feel like this is something that could just phase in. And that's where I stand on it.
Anybody else? Any direction?
I'm okay with making a motion to approve this, which is for employees, pre-employees. So I can make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Paz. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously, with some hesitation in the background.
Thank you.
You know, I think it's good. I'd like to have a report back to see how it goes. And
Yeah, absolutely.
H, conference items. Response to the District English Learner Advisory Committee DLAC recommendations.
Well, we have Dr. Jacqueline Mora and Dr. Raul Ramirez. We're going to present this. As the board is aware, our District English Language Advisory Committee makes recommendations to the school district at the end of each year, and we as a staff want to make sure that we inform the board and respond to those recommendations.
There is a very healthy attachment to this, and there's probably copies at the back of the room, I presume, maybe?
I don't
think so?
Don't know.
There were copies that were placed at your side.
Yeah, for the public, is there a copy?
Yes, there is.
I've got an extra copy if anybody wants it.
So good evening, members of the board. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. Today, we will be reviewing our response to the recommendations set forth by our DLAC for the 2015-16 school year. Each year, our DLAC is tasked to support the development, implementation, and evaluation of programs for English learners, and thus submit recommendations for the board to consider for the following school year. You have received an updated document outlining the specific recommendations in full, with our corresponding actions and individuals responsible. It is our intention to give a synopsis of that document. Our presentation is organized in such a way to distinguish between the various categories identified in the DLAC recommendations. These categories include recommendations in progress, still to be addressed, and new recommendations. Each recommendation is numbered, and for a full description, please refer to your updated document that has been handed out. In the first category, recommendations in progress, number 1, we intend to continue our recursive model of communication with DLAC. Historically, we had a mid-year report, and we will continue with that process. Recommendation 2, principals and assistant principals received training in policies and programs for English learners. 3, it is our intention to continue to provide professional development opportunities for all staff that focus on supporting English learners.
Sorry, good evening, board. In 4, we Again, going based on the recommendations, this is definitely one of our big successes for the previous year, and that yielded over 1,000 students having been reclassified. We, as you know, as you were all involved, you were all in approval, we went ahead and completely reconstituted our reclassification procedure, and very, very proud of the results that it yielded.
I'm sorry, in 2010, that was a single-digit number.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Well, I think it was definitely a group effort, and everybody really acknowledging that there needed to be some changes, which we were able to put in place last year and continue into this year. In number 5, we are looking at really looking at attendance, using attendance data to really begin to understand, as part of a starting point, to better understand the active participation of our DLAC members, as well as how those members begin to filter into and have a substantial role in other district and site committees. And another big point with number 5 is that now we have the beginnings of a really solid district framework, which we presented here a few months ago as a starting point, and you'll be hearing much more about that from Dr. Mora as it builds out this year and as it's implemented into site plans. You'll be hearing a whole lot more details about how that process is underway. In 6, we, again, coming back to the parent engagement plans, we really wanted to capitalize on the learnings that came out of our community of schools project, and really what this meant was a full expansion of many of the learnings and actions that were brought forth by our community of schools, formerly the West Side Project, and since expanded to the East Side, and this year we'll be seeing a lot more coming from that around the parent engagement framework. That work really helped inform the parent engagement framework and the real practices that we're choosing to really focus and engage in. In our seventh recommendation, there was DLAC made the recommendation, and it's been a couple of years running, about greater inclusion into STEM fields, into STEM courses, into STEM programs that accentuate and promote STEM for our students. And we're still beginning, or we're still in the beginning phases of really honing in on all those metrics, but two really important components of this. First of all, you've already heard about the Equal Opportunity Schools and our partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools, really in an effort to focus on greater inclusion and promotion of higher, more rigorous academic coursework to our English learner students, and that's a big point to be made, to the point of having 536 students who are now have been identified for placement into advanced placement courses, which of course span the entire core, but many of those are within math, science specifically. So we really wanted to broaden this and really focus on the efforts that the secondary schools have made in identifying, and from counselors to principals who have spearheaded that effort, to parents that have been there to support in this partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools. We're also looking to continue to build this out and continue to look at our more traditional measures of A through G completion, which also have strong elements of STEM attached to them as well. Also, and Mr. Herron mentioned this earlier in terms of the focus that has been made for the focus that the district has had on preschool and educating children in the 3 to 5 space. So this is another big aspect of what our DLAC was very interested in having, is English language development and a strong focus on our ELs at the youngest possible age. And this is a space in which we're focusing on really strong community partnerships that aren't reflected here. But in reality, this is we now have 18 classrooms, and our Waterford Early Learning Program is something that exists at both all our fixed sites this year, and there's also a mobile aspect that we're looking into as well. That has been traditionally that we're paying close attention to, but this is our attempt to really focus on our youngest and the earliest opportunities that we have to engage with our families and specifically with our children, to ensure that as they progress into kindergarten, we see higher and higher levels of kindergarten readiness and English language development. In recommendation 9, there was really and this is expressed in LCAP, but a focus on our long-term English learners. And a lot of this is captured in our reclassification process. Last year, just like what I can tell you is that a great deal of those 1,000+ students that were reclassified came from our high schools, students that really at this point we're just missing a few key items in terms of the reclassification, but have since moved forward, and that helped drop the number of our long-term English learners in our district. But we've also, as part of an attempt to better support our long-term English learners, we've engaged in a lot of professional learning for teachers, and part of that is the Pathway Project in collaboration with the Gewurz School of Education at UCSB. And what we are attempting to implement is really instructional norms, instructional routines that better promote learning and supports in the classroom first-time instruction, to ensure that our English learners who maybe are still bogged down by some gaps in their language proficiency have a better opportunity to access the content. In addition to that, and it's been a long-standing partnership with Scholastic around Read 180 and System 44. Over the past year, we've really done our best to create a real articulation plan from our junior highs on through, so that we avoid any redundancy in the curriculum. We really streamline what's expected of our students and what metrics we're going to look to build out in order to ensure that there is proper articulation, as students really take ownership over their own learning and families support that there is an opportunity for true acceleration. And then finally, there's also an early literacy pilot that we've engaged in over the past 6 months at McKinley and Monroe, and this is aimed at addressing all of our young readers, our emerging readers, but ensuring that they along with that they develop the literacy skills that we want to see. So this is something that we're still evaluating, and we'll evaluate this year, and then make a decision as to whether that is something that's a program that is feasible long term.
So now for recommendation 10, we have provided training for all of our administrators that focuses on the 4 responsibilities of ELAC. We will be also providing ongoing support to those administrators to ensure that this is taking place on a monthly basis. In addition to this support, we have also created district-wide materials that will be used by principals to facilitate the orientation for their ELACs. At this point, we have 12 administrators who will be co-facilitating with myself or Dr. Ramirez the ELAC orientation for their sites, 2 that have opted to contract out, 2 that have decided to facilitate individually with the created materials that we provided, and then 2 that are still determining the level of support that they need. We also worked closely with our DLAC and with Padres Unidos, United Parents, to revise our ELAC manual that will be shared with you to review. And then we also will be continuing conversations with our DLAC Executive Committee to decide on the rubric in order to determine how we are doing at each school sites in supporting our ELAC's fulfillment of the 4 key responsibilities. Recommendation 11. We will continue our partnership with Santa Barbara County Office of Ed in order to provide access to low-income families in the area of technology. So now when we move to Area B, which are recommendations still to be implemented, we have developed a draft of language access guidelines that once they are finalized will support us to creating an online request system so that schools can contact us and let us know what needs they have in relationship to interpretation and translation. We also plan to expand our Back to School Night support by providing training to our students, and we have scheduled interpretation classes and workshops so that our employees are able to develop their skills. Number 2. We have developed a tool to monitor site ELAC meetings and will offer ongoing support to site principals as needed. We will also continue to monitor the key responsibilities that ELAC is tasked to do. Recommendation 3. We will develop a plan for implementation of restorative approaches at our elementary schools. This is something that we have started last year but will continue this coming school year. 4. We developed a year-long calendar that focuses on the specific topics for our ELACs that is aligned to the DLAC calendar of meetings. In this calendar, we have identified a time for the SPSA to be discussed and reviewed. 5. Our reclassification committees are currently underway and being formed, and it is our intention to make the reclassification process more fluid so that we are reclassifying our students as they meet the criteria. We will also be providing ongoing support to site leaders as needed. 6. As mentioned previously, we have provided training for our site administrators to support in the functions of ELAC. We also will continue this training throughout the year and at the beginning of each school year so that they can continue to deepen their understanding of their role. 7. Technology workshops will be offered at La Cumbre and Franklin schools. Our site administrators are also currently working on developing their parent engagement plans, and they will be exploring viable options to offer these workshops at their sites. I've currently been meeting with them throughout this month, and our plan is to have the first iteration of their parent engagement plans completed by the end of this month. Area C, which are new recommendations. For number 1, we have provided samples of a survey instrument for our schools to use and review with their ELACs. And we have also included a timeline within the calendar that was created for them so that they can review the survey, discuss an administration window, and then come back and review the results from that instrument. And again, support will be provided to site leaders as they need it, and I will be following up with them to see how things are moving along. Number 2, we will review and discuss and revise AR 6164, which addresses and defines long-term English learners. Currently, our AR identifies them as being students that are English learners for 6 or more years, that have had 2 years of the same CELT level and two consecutive years of below basic or far below basic on a state assessment. So that will be something that we will need to review and discuss. And then this will guide us in developing customized reports so that we are able to identify the number of long-term English learners at our district and specific sites, and then offer various support so that we can begin to accelerate language acquisition for those students that have still not reclassified. And then for number 3, We will need to develop committees and focus groups in order to truly review our master plan for English learners. This will require that we have conversations around best practices, that we visit classrooms, that we see what is taking place in order to support our students. This process will roughly take about 2 years in order to complete and create a robust program to support English learners. So now, are there any questions?
It's a heck of a lot of work. And it's nice that, you know, we had a group that came with all these recommendations, but I hope it's understood that it's monumental. I mean, it's huge. And to accomplish all of this will be very difficult. But I hope we can accomplish an awful lot of it. But it is mind-boggling. I mean, and this is a question on the 1,000 students that were reclassified. What is our obligation to them going forward?
One of the things that we will be doing is I will be holding meetings with our reclassification committee to begin to identify a monitoring process for the students, because now that they've been reclassified, we need to ensure that they continue to achieve at high levels, and we need to create an instrument that will help us to monitor that progress.
How long will that take?
I'm planning to hold my first meeting with them in October. And then these conversations are already taking place with our site leaders so that they don't wait until they actually have the document in front of them. They begin to have these conversations with their staff.
And are these 1,000 students identified to our administrative staff? Do they know who they are and what the obligations they have to keep working with them?
Yes, they do.
Monitoring them? Ms. Limon?
Well, and it's just 1,000 for the 2014-15 year. There's more that are in the, in the reclassification. And, you know, Mr. Handel's not here, but I'd like to, you know, when he started, actually, that's when we started seeing the numbers move from single digits to bigger digits. So I think I want to recognize that this work was started and has continued and expanded to a great deal. So I hope to see that. That's obviously, for me, as a former EL student, it's a big, near and dear and personal issue to me. And long-term English learners are of particular concern to me. I do think that this is a lot happening, but we've been waiting for a long time to see some of these changes with meaningful outcomes. I think one of the things that I would be interested in is just how much we can and can't do, and I guess can do effectively, because I know that also, I mean, 1,017, I think that's what we had, right? 1,017 students are a lot of students to monitor. And I'm curious to hear about this tool and how we do it with a tool. But I do appreciate also there's some members of the committee that are here that brought forward some of the recommendations, and I look forward to hearing how we continue to have those how we kind of align recommendations with district practices and what that means. I don't know that it's always easy to do or that we can always do it, but I think that it's a good, it's been good so far, you know, hearing recommendations and trying to figure out what we can move forward, but I also feel like I recognize that this is a lot, and I want to make sure that we're able to effectively do it. So thank you for leading this charge. Thanks to the committee for bringing these recommendations, and I look forward to hearing more about the progress.
Dr. Paz?
I'm very curious when we look at the first new recommendation, conduct a district-wide needs assessment on a school-by-school basis. I mean, it kind of addresses some of the points that my fellow board members are kind of raising, which is when we do that, what's going to come out of it, and how do we address that without sort of placing an expectation that the district is going to fulfill that list. And I think that's an important point to kind of raise, because just as my fellow board members are also pointing out, President Herron is rightly pointing out that this is a lot to do. That list will also add to this list. And that will be a lot to do as well. And I think that that's part of the thing. It's like when we look at that and then you look at that within the context of doing an LCAP and everything else that we're doing, it does beg the question of how do we as a district sort of approach that and still be respectful to parents' needs and what they're asking for, but at the same time looking at in terms of a finite amount of resources that we have. So it is something as a board we're going to have to deal with and grapple with in a way that is still, you know, brings to the table a response, but puts it within the context of looking at everything that we have to do, which for me, I'm curious to see what comes out of that. So I would love to see what you all come up with in terms of a needs assessment and what we're really looking at and sort of the areas that you're looking at, and maybe even what the committee was thinking about in terms of a needs assessment, because I'm not sure what that really looks like. Is it school-based? Is it parent education-based? Is it family literacy-based? You can go on and on and on, and I'm not sure. So I would be curious to see that as well.
Tell me a little bit about the summer program where the teachers had 2 days for Read 180 or 1 day in 3D. How did that go and what was the response?
We had a small turnout of teachers because it was a refresher or review and they had received training previously. So they were able to receive very individualized attention and support, and it took place at La Cumbre. Additionally, the trainer was able to then go to the site to support the different teachers that were there in order to discuss the implementation. So although we didn't have a large turnout because it was a refresher and review, the individuals that were there did receive the individual attention that they needed in order to better implement when students came on board.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'd like to thank Dr. Mora for her presentation, Dr. Ramirez for his work this past year, and of course recognize Mr. Handel and all of our site leaders for really taking the recommendations to heart for the past several years and changing our practice, changing the way that we look at the work we do, how we treat our children. It's really incredible. I want to thank you for doing that and making that happen.
Yes, I agree, and I guess I would hope that the DLAC would take this document and by the end of this year, really focus on this document. Obviously, there might be new things coming along, but this is going to take more than 1 year to do, and if we add more stuff, it just makes it a lot more difficult and harder. This is a lot of work, and I hope everybody recognizes that and works really hard with you to accomplish as much of this as possible, understanding it might take more than 1 year to accomplish everything in this document. Probably take many more than 1 year, but that hopefully we're going to expand it even further. It's easy to start that ball rolling, you know, but we could be running you to death too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Review of priority facilities list, first draft. Dr. Cash.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herron. As board members are aware, we have, as a organization, gone through a lot of work in relationship to examining our school facilities, starting with a facility needs assessment that was conducted, which really looked at the state of our facilities and our systems in our district, in all of our buildings. We then went to a facility master planning process, which the board accepted or received, excuse me, at board meeting in September or in August. And from all of that, which was a lot of information and a lot of input from staff, a lot of input from our maintenance and operations staff, we put together what we think is a good talking point, discussion point, list of the priorities as seen by our facilities department and by our staff on what are the most immediate and pressing facility needs in the district. And we have our facilities director, Dave Hetjunk, and we also have Kelly Coltrup from Telecu that are here to answer any questions. I think the document's pretty self-explanatory. I was very happy the way that it got created. I want to congratulate both men for making that happen. And we're here to take direction, answer questions, get input. The goal would be for us to bring back sooner than later another list that may be closer to kind of a final project list for you to review and approve.
We have a speaker, Mr. President.
Speaker, Dr. Eberstein. Surprise, surprise.
Members of the board, Dr. Cash, thank you for the opportunity to address a few comments this evening. I'm really of very mixed minds on this priority list and school construction costs in general. The costs are just so significant that are projected for some of the projects. As an example, I'm a big believer in trying to do something about the Los Flores Children's Center on the corner of Bath and Haley. It's 2,000 square feet, 2 portables, about 1/8 of an acre or something like that. $4.5 million to redo that. And I'm just concerned about that figure, and I could go through different projects in other categories as well. $18 million for Adelante Charter School. And I don't know if I don't know where we are on this project at this point in time in terms of maybe we should go back to the drawing board. And it's something that these cost estimates strike me as very problematic in terms of I'm not sure if as I said, I think people would support significant bonds in the community, but they'd have to be persuaded that there's a real significant plan. And in looking at some of the numbers, in truth, I saw things that puzzled me in terms of what the costs were at some elementary schools compared to other schools, with the numbers of portables that were going to be replaced and all. And without trying to be anything other than constructive and positive, I hope everybody here is an expert on all of this stuff. You know, I mean, the point is, if we're saying there's $300 million of needs, then I hope we really can discuss and say, well, you know, what are these $3 million at this school, and, you know, what does this equal there? It's not just too much detail. If we're below the $10 million figure, you know, we really can't get into the details in terms of so, in other words, I guess what I'm saying is that the costs on a number of projects are very significant. I'm not sure, and I'll undoubtedly write you a memo with some further thoughts on this. And I recognize the desire of the administration to move forward with this proposal, and I appreciate that, and I've publicly said that on a number of occasions. And at the same time, I'm not sure that we're on the right track in terms of, it's something that the costs seem to me to be something that are going to require a lot more conversation, so I'm glad we're having this meeting this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Nope.
Okay. It seems to me that we're here, this is really a compilation of all the items that weren't done in the 2010 bond issue, plus some additional ones that were added, I presume, because there's been a need created or looked at in the meantime.
Or they were needs that were just not identified
And yeah, so
at the time of the 2010 bond.
So this is just a master list of everything that really was on the table in 2010 that didn't get done in 2010, 2013. And so we have the same question today that we had in 2010. How do you prioritize this entire list? How do you come up with a new 1 to 100? What's the cost of 1 to 100? And then at some point, talking about, do we need a bond to do that? And what would be the cutoff on that list? And so there's just a lot of information here, very valuable information, and I'll let the board talk. And I have a couple questions, but I'll wait. Ms. Parker?
All right, thank you, and I very much appreciate Dr. Ebenstein's comments. When I take a look at this, I mean, this is way more information than we've ever had in the past, and so I really appreciate that as we look towards our facilities needs in the future. In doing some detailed looking at it, what I could see is that some sites, for example, Adams School that has 20 portable classrooms, the costs are less for that because it's about priorities. It's about what would we actually do next as opposed to future. So that would actually leave some portables in place, for example, if we were supposed to do next projects and then do more portables, replace that with like a multi-story classroom building in the future. And so that's why I looked at that and realized why there were some disparities. But obviously, the capital needs are too high. They're too expensive. And so one question I had is, when we did the facilities master plan, that was really about ideal work. And as we move forward and look at the costs, what I'm wondering is there a more practical way, if we're going to replace some of these portables, instead of doing the most expensive project, are there plans that we could look at that maybe would cost less as we're thinking about projections to the future? Because I don't see this as feasible, unfortunately. And so that's my big question. I know what needs to be done. I know that the master plan has this ideal of what that would look like when we were done. But if we can't afford it, we can't afford it. And can we look at lower cost alternatives to, for example, replacing a portable as a, would it be lower cost to just replace the classroom rather than doing a full, two-story, multiple classroom building, that kind of thing. So that's what's running through my head.
As long as you mentioned Adams, can I just piggyback on that? Because one of the first things I noticed was that it seemed a lot cheaper to replace portables at secondary than it did elementary, from $1.1 million in elementary to $831 in secondary. But then when I looked at Adams School, for instance, for 10 portables, there's a line, and I talked to Mr. Hetjunk on this, there seems to be a line missing. If you compare 10 portables at Adams to 10 portables at Cleveland, there's a line item 4B, new construction classrooms, $7,389,000. That line doesn't exist for Adams, and we're replacing 10 portables for $3,500,000, so like $350,000 each. There seems to be a line item missing there, and I see it in other schools too, where that seems one line item seems to be not in the projections, which would change the numbers dramatically. But is there an answer to that yet, Mr. Young?
Yes, let me start by saying that this document, as you stated earlier, is kind of a combination of previous documents. It does not include every single project that was listed for a previous bond issue. It includes some of those that we thought were priorities that would bring to the board. It includes some newly identified things, and it includes some items that were kind of site priorities from the facility and master plan. So in this first draft, we do not have all of the portables being replaced. We have kind of a combination of replacing the oldest portables, doing things for infrastructure that are needed, doing some things that were identified in the facility and master plan, and we're bringing those here to kind of get your ideas on what you think is most important for your priorities, and then we would revise the list to address that. Kelly did most of the work putting this document together, so I'll give him his due and let him have first stab at answering your questions.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Herron and board members. I won't answer the questions you had specifically. And first of all, I'd like to point out that on the first page, if anybody hasn't noticed, in the far left column under child development sites, that 8.4 million divided by 5 is not in fact 714. So any math teachers in here? So that's just, if you could go back up, please. Up. It's, I guess it's on the next page. But anyway, there's an error there where the...
Bottom of page 1.
Bottom of page 1. Well, that's still gone too far.
Back down a little bit more.
I think there's multiple page ones.
Yeah, that may be, but on the, let's see, the start of the portables, it's one of 20. One of 20, you'll notice there's a disparity between, there it is. On the left-hand column there, it says $714 per unit in the child development centers. You can see clearly there's a math error, because 8.4 million divided by 5 is not 714, right? We all got that, so it's actually 1.6 million, just as the wrong bit of information got added there. So, just want to point that out real quick, because you asked why is there, why are some things appear to be missing and others don't. The line items that are actually on the individual sheets for the sites were taken from the facilities master plan. There was items, I don't know if you remember seeing on the master plan sheets for those sites, there were things that were done by program costs, they called them. Some were kindergarten construction, some were new classroom construction, some were elective and science construction, some were technology infrastructure and so forth. They didn't all apply. So that's why some might be missing. You may not see that. We need to refer
Well, no, but
back.
I'm talking about what's on these documents. For instance, Monroe has 10, excuse me, that's not, it has 10 portable, 4 being replaced. And again, new construction classrooms, $8,577,000. And you have McKinley, 10 portables being replaced, new construction classrooms, $5,545,000. You have Adams, 10 classrooms, Cleveland, 10 classrooms, $7,389,000 for new construction. But Adams, 10 portables, there is no new construction involved. I mean, and I see that other places too. I'm just curious. It seems like it throws the numbers off.
Yeah, well, look, let me start with the first one that you just went through 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, take
start
Adams
with Monroe.
School, 10 portables, and look at item 4A for kindergarten, and then the line for new construction classrooms missing. And I'm just curious if it's missing for a reason, or if it's...
Yes, the reason is because if you start with portables C, F, G, and H, those are all related to the TK, pre-K, and kindergarten. And so those would fall under the program of new construction kindergarten.
Okay, and what about the rest? The other 6? Where do you think, where are they paid for?
Well, if you go down the list, 14 through 18, we're just going to keep those temporarily. 21 is an office, needs to be demolished. 22 is a classroom, but needs to be replaced with a newer one because it's falling apart. And then when you get down to 30, 31, 32, and 33, those would be replaced with a new music, art, science building that's shown on the master plan. And so that would be under category 5 in the master plan, science and elective programs.
Good, thank you.
So that's why there are it doesn't say classrooms, because they're called something else in the master plan programming. And that's where these numbers were derived from. So that's true of all the sites.
All sites, okay.
Another good example was Cleveland, for example.
Yeah.
We can take a look at that one as a sort of a good study. 10 portables there, and you can see it seems like a lot of money for Cleveland for 10 portables, doesn't it?
Yes.
But then you've got, on the master plan, you've got one block of new kindergarten construction that's kind of by itself up by the front. And there's also a 2-story building. If you read down the recommendations column, there's a multi-story building for science, art, and music that's at the back of the campus, as shown on the master plan. So these were derived from looking at the specific sites and what the portables would be replaced with. So I don't know if you want to go through all of them, but that's how,
No,
that's the methodology.
Okay.
So our goal at this particular point is to get from you, what is it that you want? I mean, if this format isn't easy to understand, I mean, if you want just a list, like 1 through 100, and including what specific portables, I don't know that we can give you that kind of detail, because the portables have been set up, and hopefully the goal would be to replace them with a building, not with just individual classrooms, which requires a different infrastructure than a portable building.
Ms. Limon?
So I want to go back just a little bit. I was trying to figure out what need meant? Like, what were the categories or restrictions or guidelines given for needs? I mean, because I'm looking at it, well, we get this, and I actually thought the document was I thought it was user-friendly. I liked the document. But it's too much. So then you go back to the drawing board and say, well, we can't do all of this. Even if we were to go out for a bond, but we haven't made that decision, we can't do this. So I'm stuck. And I don't know how to think of needs. What, is there like a safety zone, like this has to be done ASAP, versus another one, well, it'll survive the first El Nino, but maybe not a second El Nino. I mean, I don't know how to think of needs. Knowing also, recognizing that, I said El Nino, but really we could have more needs after this winter. So can you just help me? How do I think about needs?
The building part of the facility person says, I always want to make sure that all of my buildings are watertight and weatherproof. Also want them to be able to basically function. So I would say that as far as our priorities, we want to look at places where we have critical electrical infrastructure that needs to be replaced and roofs that need to be replaced. We have some very old buildings that at some point in time you have to say to yourself, do we really want to put any more money into these old portable buildings? If one starts to leak, are we being fair to spend $8,000 on a roof for a portable that's 40 years old that should be demolished? And I think as part of this, we looked at, well, if there's 4 portables at this site that are really old and need to go, what do we replace them with? Do we replace them with 4 classrooms, or do we replace them with a science and art, a music type thing in that building, and then allow the principal to switch things around and move some programs to best fit what would be in those new buildings? Maybe the music portable that the principal is using or the art portable isn't one of the worst ones, but if you put that in a new building, then you could put a different type of class in that art portable, which basically would have a sink and some flooring that another program could actually use. I mean, you can do science. You can think about our new buildings at Adams is what is there as a technology lab or a STEM lab. Is that something we want to see at all of our elementary sites when we replace portables and put one of those buildings there? Those are the types of things we'd like to hear from the board as to what do you feel are your priorities. Then we can start making a long list and say, well, these are the things that are most important to us. I mean, we could have brought you a list that was much greater than 300 million, but we kind of pared it down first for the purposes of this discussion.
Yeah, well, the original list is twice as big. So the goal really was to give you a document that you could understand and provide input on.
Ms. Adelson?
It's a big number. I think we're all, still trying to process that. But a couple questions. In most of these, are the portables classrooms versus multi-purpose portables where, like I know at Adams when we were looking at the library, the new library, which was amazing, but they, at the end of the walkway there, the principal said, well, we've enjoyed the fact that, the kids can rotate through those portables and have computer science, music, and, and it seemed like maybe in that sense, portables were working fine. I mean, a permanent classroom may not be as required, but then when I think of the days of Roosevelt, with crumbling portables, it was essential that we get a permanent classrooms or replacement portables. But I'm sort of feeling, in answer to Ms. Lamone's comment, that there reaches a point with these portables where they are not going to go on forever, and we know that. And then at what point do we say a permanent classroom is the best bet?
I think from our point of view, we want to replace the worst first, and I would advocate replacing those with permanent classrooms. Now, if that permanent classroom we replace it with is a specific type of classroom or just a generic classroom, when you're building a new building, if you're at an area where you have utilities available, if you are going to do something extra with power or water, it's not that big of a percentage of expense when you're doing a whole new building than if you're going in trying to retrofit and bring that utility into one certain portable. Like, I
Right.
would like this to be an art portable, but I'm, 300 yards from a water and sewer, and we have to have the sink drain into a sewer. We can't, just like a drinking fountain. It used to be drinking fountains could empty out onto the playground. Not anymore. All our drinking fountains need to be piped into a sewer system.
And,
And so we look at those types of things, and so it's basically, we always said we'd like to replace portable classrooms, eventually all of them. We have some portable classrooms that are not that old, that are very functional, and we have others that I cringe every time I look at them, thinking that, do I really want to, put any money in this old building?
And I think also one thing maybe comes to mind with each school site is the population of students coming in over the long run, because if we do build permanent classrooms, we're looking at lasting 70 years, hopefully, or, the real long run for these.
And we've done some libraries, we've done some rooms like that, we've done the multi-purpose room at Franklin, so there's things that the board has seen that they can kind of compare a multi-purpose room at Harding, for instance, with Franklin, and say, okay, what do I think the priorities are for some of these schools that really need a multi-purpose room?
Dr. Paz.
I guess we're kind of all in the same boat in terms of trying to find a way to look at these and sort of, if we had principles or if we had a framework, if we had something to kind of focus our lens a little more. And I think even the comments that you both made a little bit earlier in terms of what you would do is helpful. And I guess that's what we're kind of searching for, because I would even argue, if I looked at all this list, that for me, safety first is a priority. But we could argue that all of these have some safety implications, right? So I guess that's where we're at. You can make the definition this big, and we could try to make it this small, but we could still argue back to this big. So that's the hard part right now, because even, let's take the example that Ms. Limon was talking about for next year. Let's say we have an El Nino, and it's the 100-year storm that comes. And now we have those windows that are historic in our historic buildings, and they fail. What then? Are we going to put those at the top of the priority list versus the windows of a school that is not so bad? So I think that's where we're kind of at in terms of trying to look at this list and trying to find a place that is sort of narrows it down for us a bit in terms of looking at it priority-wise. For me, I have to look at this from a perspective, if I'm going to throw something out, it has to be safety. What are those places on this list that absolutely have to? I'm not suggesting by any means that we're putting children in unsafe places, but if we're going to look at this list and say 5 years from now, that probably is not going to be a good place for kids to be, then that's probably the one I'm going to shoot for, if we're going to narrow this list down a little more. And then after that, if we have something that is more aligned, like you were mentioning before, if we have a STEM lab that someone wants, sorry, but that's lower in the bottom of the priority list. That's not going to be my priority list. As much as I would like to see it, I have to look at it from the practical point of view and saying, do we have buildings, do we have places that are not the best for kids to be in, from a safety perspective, from a point of functionality for the teacher in that classroom. I have to kind of look at it from that perspective. So I'm going to throw that out there for right now.
Ms. Parker?
I think where I am, and I appreciate you bringing up the historic windows, because that is a huge priority, and I feel like that cost is that cost. And so that's something to me that we can't keep putting off. In terms of the portables, we can call this the art building or the science building, but another year that could be a classroom. It really is about the age and the condition of it and whether or not we should be investing money in it. I appreciate the way you put that, Mr. Hetjank. I feel like we perhaps need a priority 1A and a priority 1B because this isn't, cost-wise, this isn't feasible to do. And also, my other point being, is there a way to look at reducing costs so that perhaps it's not the ideal building, but one that we could still be happy with on our campuses, and that would serve our students well. So that's where I'm at on this.
You know, the numbers don't surprise me at all. I mean, I think this is something that we knew was coming, and I mean, all of our studies going back to 2010 shows a tremendous unmet need. I would look at it from the standpoint that this plan is based upon, I think, 127 portables being replaced. I think that's way too many. I mean, I look at the list, and there's 64 that are over 25 years. There's 81 over 20 years, if my numbers are correct. I don't think we can do 127 portables. I think that's going to be way too many. So I think, number one, that aspect, we all want to replace some portables. So the question is, how many can we do at what price, you might say? And so I think to get to a lower number, that's one thing I would look at. The ADA restrooms, are we under some requirement to do those?
We have some restrooms on our campuses that were not part of our transition plan when we went through with our lawsuit settlement, probably 12 years ago,
right.
13 years ago, something like that. In time, those are going to be required when you go in and modernize a building. The Division of the State Architects are going to require us to bring a lot of these up to current code, which will include not only what you've traditionally seen in a ADA restroom, but also a different type of stall for people that are not mobile, but not in a wheelchair, if I may use the term, and you're going to see a different type of size stall, adaptive stall in these restrooms in the future. So the codes are changing all the time. Our new fire alarm systems are going to have a voice associated with them. There's a lot of things that are coming up in the code for energy efficiency. In a few weeks, we're going to have hopefully our Prop 39 before the board. There was an advertisement in the paper this weekend giving notice that we intend to bring you a resolution. None of that money is being spent on portable classrooms. It's all being spent on our permanent classrooms. And so you'll...
Well, my ADA question was more like for Dr. Paz. If that's something we're required to do or morally required to do, that would go to the top of my list, or towards the top. All the roofs that we didn't get done with the current bond issue, I mean, we forego 2 or 3 roofs, if I recall correctly.
Correct.
Those would go to the top of my list. If I was looking at a list of, it was required for the bond we just are finishing and didn't get done, they would go. I would sort of look at the lower price things, the 250, 300, 350, and probably say to myself, unless there's something really mandatory in those, we're going to have to bite the bullet and start paying for some of those ourselves out of our yearly income. But to use the bond money for, something with $200,000 may not be the best use of the bond money. If we're going to have to convince voters, it might have to be big-ticket items. So I would look at more big-ticket items that are substantial that the voter could really see. I mean, paving a school parking lot probably is not a hot button to the voters. So I would look at the smaller items and maybe not make those a priority. I don't know if we need to talk about the photovoltaic systems, for $5, $10, $15 million. That's a good investment because I guess it saves us money down the road in energy costs. But to spend $15 or $17 million now out of bond money, I'm not quite sure I would be in favor of that. But roofing projects, ADA restrooms, a smaller quantity of portables, the play equipment at Washington, 350, Roosevelt, 250, we have to bite the bullet maybe and pay for those, not use bond money. I think the multi-purpose rooms and food service improvements, You know, every single child at a school takes advantage of those. And when you have something at Franklin that is so darn good, and you have other schools that have almost nothing, from a parity standpoint, those things probably would be of interest to me. So if I was coming back with a list of 100, those are some of the priorities I would look at.
Would you
Mr. Moon?
like it in a list form? I mean, we really need this kind of, I mean, how do you want it? Like the number one thing to the number, I mean, number 5,000 thing. I mean, that's a lot of work for staff to engage in. I mean, it would be nice to have some guidance on, like, is 200 million? I mean, the real purpose, there is no belief that we're going to be looking to do $300 million worth of projects or asking the voters to do that. This was our attempt to show you of all of the projects, if we prioritized them and said these are the most important in the elementary schools and secondary schools, this is what they would be, and this is what we estimate their costs to be. So from you, we would like to know what's on the list that shouldn't be, and I think we've heard some ideas, what's not on the list that should be from your perspective, so that we can come back with a document that's more in tune with your thinking.
That did remind me of one thing. On the 2013 list, there was about $60 million in the secondary district for, quote, modernization. How did that get translated into this document? Because in this document, I don't see any modernization other than new buildings. But is it the new buildings that qualify for modernization?
Right, the new buildings are new construction programs, and the modernizations were pretty much left out of this.
So there's no money for modernization?
Right. If you go to the, if you go to the again, the facilities master plan, there's a line for modernizations of different types. I think there's 2 or 3 categories in each site plan.
It would just mean more money at the bottom line.
I would, you know, I would argue that we should have a line item in this list of things for modernization. I mean, we've been promising the voters that in the bond, the last bond issue, that we would do modernization. And some classrooms need modernization. But yeah, I would like, I mean, this document's fantastic, outlining the big picture.
Mm-hmm. It's our first draft.
Yeah, the next stage to me is, okay, what does the board think of these items, category-wise, are the most important? You know, I think top of the list might be portables, but how many portables would be a big question. And then roofs and bathrooms might be another category for safety purposes. And anything else that's a safety issue might rise to that level too.
So one of the things that I think was mentioned was perhaps not a list of 1 to 100, because this is my problem. Like, how do you make a 1 a 1? I don't understand how 1 becomes a 1. And so just areas where this is a safety issue, where this is like category B safety issue or whatever it is, I think would be helpful. I, want to talk about the windows. That's more than $22 million. And I'm trying to figure out how we do windows for more than $22 million if we go out for a bond. But if they're a safety issue, I feel like that needs to be in category whatever, red or whatever we're doing. So that's something that's helpful to me. I do want to see more green projects. So photovoltaic is something that I'd like to see. A couple things. We have Prop 39. We have green initiatives. We have an organization that's come forward that's going to help us pay for some of this. So I kind of see it as a way that just as we've had private partners come in to do certain projects that are very important for a particular school, I would like to see more green initiatives, especially if I'm outweighing, gosh, well, yeah, it's 15, but if that's not what we all have to spend, and if there's partnerships out there with groups, organizations, the state, then you're talking about less. And so that's something that I think is important to me. There's some infrastructure stuff, like I think like electrical, sewage, like I'm guessing that sewage replacement needs to be done. I tended to see anything that said modernization and said, that's nice, but I don't know that if it's not a safety issue that I am likely to do modernization. Now, having said all of this is all great, but if we do go out for a bond, and the voters are more inclined to support certain things, this is a huge list, so I could be convinced to go towards modernization, to go towards anything else if this is something that the community wants to see. So I'm trying to figure out what comes first. What, do we narrow down this list, or is this list going to get input from people who might someday vote on a bond, and then we rework it? How do I understand that timeline and process? Because
We're going to get a facilities priority list, and then we're going to ask, in polling, if we're moving forward, for the voters to let us know what they think of that facilities list, and we'll give them alternatives to consider as well.
So, and that facilities voters list is going to be, I mean, they would never see something so detailed, like 28 pages, but is going to be smaller than this. That's what we're trying to do. Our goal is to make that facilities list smaller. I mean, in that category.
Well, I don't think we can ask, we can't ask the voters, do you want, general questions. Would you like to replace portables? Are you, we'll have a professional that will ensure that that gets asked in a way that provides good information. It's just important for us in planning purposes to understand what it is the board believes we need to be focusing on moving forward.
Dr. Paz.
I think that, when you look at the first few pages, it's helpful because we have the bigger, broader categories that we're talking about, and the first on that list is portables. And we've all talked about portables, so I would say we're throwing that on the list. That's number one, maybe, perhaps. Then paving is on the second part of the list. For me, is that the major? Probably not. But then when you go down the list and you go look at mechanical systems, that's kind of a priority area. Someone, the modernization for a lot of people would be the sexy thing to do, so to speak, right? Because it looks nice. But if the infrastructure behind all that is falling apart and you have shoddy electrical and it's falling apart and your sewer system is being backed up, I think that needs to take a priority. So I would say that the second. Play equipment and fall services, that for me is a risk area. As much as that seems like an extra, that's a risk. If we don't have surfaces where kids are going to play and not fall, and that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. So I would look at that. Roofing projects takes a priority. If we don't have a roof that prevents leaks, well, what's the purpose of doing any modernization? Because we're going to have nothing accomplished because of that. So I would look at that as a priority area. And then when I start looking at all the other pieces, like the painting, that can wait, has to wait, unless it's something that's going to cause it to fail, like the building itself. And all the other pieces, when I look at some of those other pieces, if we look at hillside stabilization and it's imminent that if we don't fix that, the whole entire school is going to fall on the next neighborhood down we have to look at that. Then you get into the window renovation historical sites, and that is a hard one for me to deal with, because when you look at the overall cost, you look at McKinley, $1.2 million for that. That's a hard one for me to swallow. And that, unless I see a window that's going to fail, or you're going to tell me that window is going to fail, I'm going to tell you, wait on that window. That would be my thing. And so I look at it as the list, and then on the side are the stuff that we're going to look at that list with a lens. And my lens is safety first, the stuff that's going to really cause us, as you pointed out really well, that's going to cause us more money in the end. So the roof, that's an important one. That's going to cause us more money in the end. So that's my viewpoint, my take.
What's the elevator at McKinley?
At McKinley, we have a large area of classroom space on the second floor that is not accessible to individuals with handicaps. And so we are not allowed to put classrooms in there.
No student can go.
And so it's not any place that we can house students. We can't have a program in an area where the student and staff and visitors and parents, if they need accessibility, are not able to access that location. So by putting an elevator in McKinley to reach that second floor area that's currently a tight set of stairs, you could probably have 3 classrooms up there with a little bit of work.
And do we need them? I mean, are we impacted?
Well, yeah,
Yes.
it would eliminate the need for 3 old portables on the site.
Well, see, that's a good trade-off.
Yeah.
What is the $5 million for hill stabilization? That's a new item.
Hillside stabilization is not really...
If we have a 100-year El Nino, it could be more than that.
We have done some temporary mitigation measures to divert water in the most appropriate places at that hillside. But at some point in time, if we don't do to that hillside what you see Caltrans do to freeways to keep the side stabilized, more and more of that school, especially on the playground area, on the bottom side, back side of the school, above some condominiums and apartments, is going to start to slide down the hill. Our property line runs about halfway up that hill. So we can do work on our upper half to prevent it from sliding, and then we depend on the people that own the property below us to do their part if they wished when they saw fit. But we need to keep our property from sliding down on somebody else's.
And it looks like there's $120,000 for a study, and then based upon that study, $5 million for the project. Is that how I read that?
Yes.
And that's a guess by somebody?
Well, it's an educated guess.
Educated.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's by our civil engineer.
We know how much it costs to hire an engineer and a geotechnical consultant and get recommendations from them.
Well, Dr. Paz, your recommendations almost include everything, so, you know, and that's just for elementary.
I'm looking at it from the perspective is that those are the important pieces. And then the lens to look at it is within that list, safety and the stuff that's going to cost us the most at the end. If you're telling me within, like, even the roofing projects, for example, if you're going to tell me that it's going to cost us 5 times the amount of money 5 years from now versus doing it now, I'm going to tell you, go ahead and do it now. So that's my way of looking at it, my take. I mean, I think all of it becomes some level of priority, again, when we're looking at sort of like the big picture versus trying to narrow it down. And for me, is looking at the list in terms of, we all agree we need to get rid of portables. Paving becomes like way closer to the bottom. Painting becomes way closer to the bottom. But if you're looking at roofing and the infrastructure of our buildings, that becomes a priority for me. So if you want me to narrow it down, that's it.
Where it talks about painting, how does this painting compare to our maintenance plan that calls for painting going forward 10 years? Is this something over and above that maintenance plan?
Typically, our maintenance department does all interior painting and graffiti removal. When we do painting with capital funds projects, it's usually painting the exterior of a school, such as what was done at McKinley a few years back. We have 2 schools that are in dire need of painting, and again, that's part of the infrastructure to help keep water and everything else out. And I'd say the 2 schools, Kelly may know of more off the top of his head, but I'm thinking off the top of my head, Harding and Peabody are 2 schools that are in desperate need of exterior paint. The others could probably wait.
Well, the format of the document by school, is that appropriate? Or would you rather have it just by function and no school identified?
I thought it was okay to see the school. I'd also think it actually helps us to understand what we're talking about, and oh yeah, that's part. So I was fine by school and seeing the summaries, but I mean, I think I'm just trying to figure out how to narrow it down. So I don't.
We will narrow it down. I mean, that's not a hard job to do. Just cut it in half.
I think it helped to see the schools, and I have one other question. It's not a big ticket, but on an intercom replacement project, are we still, I mean, we all are wireless and all that. Are intercoms required by the state, or?
We're looking at some type of communication. I don't know if it's a state requirement, but I would consider it a safety requirement.
Yeah.
And We have some junior highs that we've looked at along with Mr. Rickman and his department as far as putting in a mass notification system, and those, I believe, were carryovers. Dos Pueblos and 3 of our junior highs are in need of updated communication systems, and those would be, 4 of my priorities.
I don't know if Dr. Ebenstein wants to answer this question for me, but I think the overriding question is, what's the appetite for a bond? Do you have any, Doctor, do you have any feel for what you think now after thinking about it? What's the appetite, elementary and secondary, one or the other, both?
Thank you, and I don't mean to be a gloomy Gus here or something like that, but my own view is that if each district could keep to under $100 million, I think that would be optimal. I think that $80 to $90 million in both districts is sort of the figure that is, I think, most realistic. That's not polling, but that, the city college bond showed they would have support, and with a little campaign it got knocked way down. So I believe that voters are more reluctant on these things, and I don't think we're looking at, 100 million plus bonds, maybe in the secondary district a little bit more, but, that would be my off the cuff.
Thank you. I don't mind seeing the school, but my overriding desire always has been, is what's the most important thing to do? And if you add the school to the item, that's fine, but I prefer to see the items that we have to do in some type of order, so we can say, okay, it's going to be $100 million at this line, and everything above that line is a priority. And it might be Adams, it might be McKinley, it might be, So I'd like to see some type of outline of that we can draw a line and say, okay, here's the items that are going to be the priority. It's harder to do when you see it all by school like this. I guess I'd sort of like to see it more broken down by priority. And if the school's added to it, that's fine. I don't mind that. But, we may have a roof at Adams that is more important than a roof at Harding or whatever. And so I'd rather see the items that are most important in front of me somehow.
So that means to me a list.
That's what we did in 2010 and 2013, and I think it worked pretty well.
But do you try to, though, achieve some parity across the district?
I don't believe in parity.
No. Huh.
I don't believe in parity. What are the most important, and this is my personal feeling, what are the most important things? If there's something more important in one school than another, just to do it for parity, it doesn't make any sense to me. That's just my personal feeling.
And I think for me, I would like to see the school. I don't need to see it, if we were doing 12 roofs, I'd like to see roof Adams, roof whatever, Cleveland, but I don't know that what would be useful for me is a list like a 1 through 100, and okay, top 50 make it in and the top don't, as opposed to, again, categories of this is high need ASAP, whether we have money or not, we need to figure out how to do this. So I don't know what kind of list that means. I don't know if that's the same thing that,
We're talking the same thing, I think.
Yeah.
It's what are the most important items?
That's what we gave you tonight. Our first draft,
we
that's the
can't do
most
them.
important items.
Yeah.
Right.
We can't do them, so it's...
So from that list, we've heard as to what you think, so we'll try to capture that in the next draft.
I think for me it is looking at those broader categories that I think we could all agree on. For me, it's the portables, looking at the infrastructure. For me, infrastructure defined as electrical, sewer, mechanical, that it has to be there because of safety issues or there's a requirement. And then beyond that is looking at through the lens of safety and what's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck right now and save us money in the end.
One of the things I will tell you is that for safety, paving will be close to the top of the list.
If we have to do it, we have to do it because of safety concern. I kind of made the same point to looking at, play equipment stuff. If there's a safety issue, we'll do it. It may not be the sexy thing to do. It may not be the best thing to do, but we'll do it. So that's my thing, to kind of look at it. And I would agree with Mr. Herron that it's not about parity for me. It's about what it needs to get done across our entire school district. And if it happens to be that we have one school that's worse off than all of them, and it gets a good chunk of our money, that's where it has to go.
So, I'm sorry.
You mentioned paving, and I guess that would fall into my question, I guess, and maybe Mr. Tay. Franklin is, McKinley's 250,000, 500,000, 450 for playground renovation. I mean, do we have funds in our general fund to pay for some of these smaller items and not depend upon bond to do it? If we have a plan over the next 5 years of taking money on an annual basis to pay for some of these smaller things that maybe we shouldn't use bond money for.
Well, if those items were on the deferred maintenance plan, absolutely, that's what we did just on the close of the books. This year, we did put 1.5 million. We could assigned 1.5 million to deferred maintenance. So if those are on there, yes, we do have money. You also, if you want to fund these things instead of having a 17% fund balance, absolutely, we can do that.
No, I want that.
Me too, but.
I know.
I mean, but these are the trade-offs we have to make. Yeah. I mean, these are the trade-offs we have to make.
Right.
Something has to give. If we can't do these, but my sense is that what's going to come back to us is that the need and safety issues are even probably going to be more than what we want. And I mean, what we're not accounting for as well is that while we may want, may feel parity is not as important as much as it is need, the voters like to see something happening at their schools. While we may feel that need is important, the voters might not want to see what we see. And so I think that this is going to be the balance of what we're going to have to talk about as well.
That's one of the reasons I asked Dr. Cash to give you all a copy of the Godbey Research Program from 2010, that for that bond issue, it outlined a lot of questions about how does the public feel about certain things, and that's the same kind of questionnaire survey that would come. We talked a lot about the elementary, Dr. Paz, but there's a lot of things in secondary on the same types of items, but they're a lot bigger numbers. Yes. How do we look at the secondary as far as priority goes on some of these things, like San Marcos High School library modernization, $3.5 million. Dining and kitchen at San Marcos, $5 million. It's a new item.
Well, based upon what I've heard so far, I can just tell you those will not be in the second draft.
There's a lot of roofing projects, of which at least 3 of them were from the previous bond. Window replacement, $20 million. A lot of big-ticket items in the secondary side.
Well, I think Ms. Parker also made a suggestion, and I don't know if this is possible given at the stage we're at, but the suggestion was that, well, there's some of these projects where, for example, you gave us the, you talked about we replace portables, and what we're replacing them with is what's going to cost us this. And so I think the suggestion was, can we go back and say, well, that's what you wanted, but you can function with a smaller level. I mean, I don't know if at this stage that's even possible, because we essentially already had these conversations, looked at these plans, but is that even a possibility at this stage? And it might not be.
Absolutely. You can replace every portable classroom with just another brand new portable, or you can replace portable classrooms that are situated in a building style with just a classroom building. Tilt-up construction. There's very inexpensive and cheap ways to build buildings that won't last 100 years. But you'll get more buildings. So
I mean, and that, I think, I don't love it. It doesn't make me feel good that we're not going to get our biggest bang for our buck, but we are trying to figure out how to maximize the money that we may have.
So are we.
So
absolutely.
A question, I mean, say Adelante, this has $18 million worth of work. Before we think about a project like that, do we need to think about other alternatives before spending $18 million for a little school, in essence? Is there, I'd hate to sit here and say, let's go $18 million for Adelante without thinking what other options are there. Is there a way to look at other options on some of these that before we would even think about spending $18 million on?
Well, I would say the co-location of elementary schools on junior high campuses has not been successful. That was an option previous boards chose, and that has proven to be not a successful option. An option would be to build a new school on the Hidden Valley property, which I would hazard to guess would be substantially more than 18 million. An option is to not have Adelante as a charter school, which I don't believe is an option, or to not replace Adelante's portables, to leave them in a portable school, which I've said consistently that if in fact Adelante charter school is a going concern, we need, as a district, treat it as such. And I would advocate that school is on the move, and they deserve a real building.
The other function that's there on the corner, children's, is that a good place for that?
Oh, gosh, yes, it's an excellent place. It meets the need of the East Side community greatly. And unfortunately, the Parma Center is not Field Act approved, and so we can't house children in the Parma Center. And you know, I mean, if there was an appetite for more projects, that would be a big project on the list for a complete renovation in order to house early childhood education programs.
Is that something we might want to look at?
Well, we looked at it and didn't include it. We certainly can include it on this one, but it'll knock out a lot of other things.
Okay. Getting back to the portables, Dr. Paz, you mentioned portables as you're up there, but I am curious, how does the board feel about the number of portables? I mean, this plan says 127, which would be close to $127 million right there for portables. Is there any direction to staff as to how many portables should be looked at?
I don't have a number, but again, I would take the same outlook that I provided before, which is look at it from a safety concern first. Do we have portables that a year from now, 2 years from now, are going to get to that point in time where you're going to feel, I don't want to stick kids in that classroom? That should rise to the top. If we have a portable that's 30 years old and still looking pretty good, maybe that goes to the bottom a little bit. And if we have a portable that's kind of in the middle, maybe it's the portable that we could keep going for a little bit of time, but is it worth the money? And that compared to something else, we shifted around a little bit in that regard. I know it's not necessarily an answer that you're looking for in terms of a number, but it will help us. And then we can look at it, if it comes back to us again one more time, look at it from a numbers perspective and start maybe making some tough choices and say, well, okay, we have the majority are right here, well, we're going to cut it off right there.
And I think for me, if I had to take a wild guess, I would probably guess that the older class portables are in worse shape than some of the newer ones. So if I had to say something, I was looking at 20 year and above, and not that the 18 year is going to be any better, but I mean, if there has to be a cutoff, that was what I was thinking, but I could be wrong, maybe.
Yeah, the only older portables that are in better shape are the ones at Washington, where we spent some money going through, putting on, upgrading the roofing, redoing all the siding, redoing all the flooring. The interiors of those is in pretty good shape. However, the exterior is not in that great a shape and could use some attention. They're the ones that have the new heating ventilating units, so they're a little bit quieter, a little bit better teaching environments than some of the other ones.
And none of those are on this list.
Correct.
Correct. But sometimes you may have a group of portables where there's, like at Dos Pueblos, there's some there that are in really dire shape, and there's a couple at Santa Barbara High that are in really dire shape. Kind of like when we did San Marcos, when we put the new B-wing in, we got rid of the older ones and reconfigured and kept some of the newer ones.
That's
even
what
though,
this
even though
plan
there's
is
still a couple
filled
old
with
ones
already,
there.
is those discrete decisions.
Yeah, there's 25 over 40 years old, so that might be the...
Right. And there's about 81 over 20 years old.
So whether the cutoff is 20 or 25, you know, I think those numbers have to be looked at to see where...
We received a lot of good input. We can definitely come back with recommendations.
You got a lot of input. You wanted input.
That's exactly what we wanted.
Yeah, well, that's what's the purpose of it. I still am going to ask again, what I'm hearing is you want a list.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what you'll get. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Coltrip and Mr. Hetyoung.
A lot of work. H3, discussion regarding 2016-17 local control and accountability plan. Dr. Cash.
Thank you very much. I very briefly wanted to just remind the board of the process that we're engaged in and let you know of some upcoming events. I'm going to talk really fast because that took longer than I anticipated. We're in the same 5 phases that we have used the last 2 years. They're on the document. We intend to complete Phase 1 by November 10th, Phase 2 by February 5th, Phase 3 by March 4th, Phase 4 by April 15th, and Phase 5 is our public hearings and board adoption of the LCAP. And that's the process that we intend to go through. For 16-17, the state priorities remain the same. Targeted students remain the same. LCAP rubric, which we're supposed to have in 2016. It'll be interesting to see if we actually get it. There is a new state agency called the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, whose sole purpose it is to support school districts meet the goals that they've identified in their LCAP. And that they just appointed the executive director, Carl Cohn. The document itself will not change, unfortunately. And the processes that we're required by law to engage in has not changed as well. What will change for us in next year is how we identify goals. We're going to align our goals to our 4 aims plus 1 more. And the reason we're going to do that is we believe that the current iteration, where most all districts have tried to align it all to just the 8 state priorities, has created 25 to 30 goals. I mean, I was at the superintendent council meeting last week, and a superintendent, we were meeting with Carl Cohn, and he was asking about the LCAPs. The superintendent on the council said, well, I have 126 goals, and my LCAP is 412 pages long. And that clearly means no one reads it. And I thought to myself, I'm quite certain even his school board probably didn't read a 412-page document. So our goal is to, the goal isn't to reduce the number of pages. We hope that would be a consequence of this process. But we're going to go to the goals that you should be aware of. It's completely aligned with our strategic plan: life, career, and college-ready students, student, family, and community engagement, organizational transformation, sustainable facilities, and the 5th goal that we have added is early childhood education. Really believe that needs to be, has been a focus of mine, and it needs to be a pretty straightforward focus of our LCAP. So here's a little brief into what we plan to do. On October 27th, Drs. Drotti and Ramirez are going to make a presentation on some of the work that we will be looking at in creating life, career, and college-ready students. On November 10th, they will continue along with Dr. Mora in discussing student, family, and community engagement. December 8th, we'll talk about organizational transformation. In January or February, I didn't want to suppose that the board meetings would remain the same, because you all get to decide what dates the board meetings will be, but just in January and in February, we'll take up sustainable facilities and early childhood education and give you some insight as to the things that we're thinking about, the programs that we're discussing, some of the actions that we're taking, so you can have a longer view of the LCAP and the work that we're doing prior to getting our 492-page document. So I did that as quickly as I could.
Good job. Thank you very much.
Mr. Herron, if I may.
Yes.
I just want to really give a shout out to that plan, because we want to have the strategic plan in front of us, and this is such a beautiful way of combining the strategic plan and the LCAP in a way that is digestible. Thank you.
You should thank Dr. Drotti.
Dr. Drotti.
He facilitated that
Thank you.
agreement with all of our principals.
Thank you, Dr. Drotti. Okay, first reading board policy and AR 1312.3, uniform complaint procedures.
For this one, we'll ask Ms. Fran Wagenknecht to take this one.
All right. Mr. Herron and the board, presenting to you the updated uniform complaint procedures, both the board policy and the AR, which are in compliance with new requirements for 2015-16. Regulation also clarifies the timeline for filing of complaints regarding student fees and reflects new Office of Civil Rights guidance, recommending that districts use websites and social media to post non-discrimination notices, policies and procedures, and contact information for compliance officer or officers.
Are there changes on there as you scroll up?
There should be.
Can
They
you
should
scroll?
be there in.
Yeah, there they are. I
in
knew there was.
Deletions and additions.
Ms. Parker?
I think this looks good. Thank you. And one question I have about this is that when we have the words uniform complaint in like 2 or 3 other policies, but this is the most generic of the ones that exist. The other ones have exhibits where you see a complaint form. And I don't know, because there isn't an exhibit for this, if a complaint form per se doesn't exist, if it's just meant to be written in whatever form it takes, or if there is one and it's just not attached.
Within our district, we have a complaint form specifically for Williams Act. Other complaints come in whatever form they come in, through email, phone call, face-to-face, that sort of thing.
Do we ultimately want it to be written from somebody, however? You know, if you get a verbal complaint.
So here's what we've done on that, because and this is advice from council, is that we have followed up with what we consider to be a complaint and inquired in writing, are you filing a complaint? And we act as if they are, because if in fact their intention was to file a complaint, we have specific timelines that we have to operate under.
I think it would be great, and I haven't thought about what this sentence would look like, but just to add a sentence that kind of clarifies that maybe the complaint could come in any form, but that it will ultimately be summarized in writing so that the process can start officially, because otherwise there's just no record.
Yeah, the record.
And I have had people say, you say to do this, but there's no form. And I was like, well, just send an email. But
yeah, part of that, and some districts have chosen, you have to fill out the form, but from my perspective, that would have the tendency to discourage complaints. Not that I want to encourage complaints, but I want to know if there are issues that need to be remedied. So that's why and I know Mr. Torina did it in student services, and he does it in HR. All of us, if we get even a whiff of what we think is a complaint, we try to affirm or disaffirm that with the complainant.
Anything else? Any further direction? Do you want this to come back next week, or next meeting?
Next meeting, yeah. Consent even, maybe?
Consent calendar?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
H5, first reading, AR 4161.1, 4361.1, and 4261.1. All seen this.
This is Mr. Torina's item.
Personal illness injury leave.
President Herron, board members, as new and/or revised federal regulations and California Education Code become law, and when legal cases affect board policies, the CSBA provides our district with updated samples or replacement policies. Just to be clear, AR 4161.1 and 4361.1 apply to our certificated management personnel, whereas 4261.1 applies to our classified personnel. And the basic change is in reflection to the new law, AB 1522, which is requiring us to grant paid sick leave to any and all employees who work 30 or more days per year. The big condition on this is that it's expanding what we can consider sick leave for that, and it feels, in its 2 areas. It's the diagnosis, care, or treatment of an existing health condition or preventative care for an employee or his or her family member, defined to include domestic partners and siblings, and the need of an employee who has been the victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking to seek any relief or medical attention for himself, herself, or his or her child. So those are two areas that were not counted as sick leave that this new change allows us. And also the idea that we are required to pay sick leave to any of our temporary or substitute personnel after they work 30 days for our current school year.
Questions, comments? Okay, bring it back on consent calendar.
Okay, thank you.
H6, first reading of Board Policy 5131.2 on bullying.
Ms. Wagening.
So this policy is updated to clarify the appropriate use of the uniform complaint procedures in cases of non-discriminatory bullying. As revised, the policy provides that the UCP can be used to investigate all instances of bullying, but that conduct determined to be non-discriminatory bullying then be resolved in accordance with the district's student discipline policies and procedures.
Can you scroll to the changes?
And the big changes are on page 3.
Right there, yeah.
So it really lays out for us the process. Again, it goes back to what Ms. Parker was talking about, another uniform complaint procedure and discriminating between discriminatory and non-discriminatory bullying.
Someplace, is there a description or a definition? If somebody sees bullying on the playground, how do they determine, is it bullying, is it just play? I mean, how does the parent or the guardian or the student or the staff determine that it is really bullying versus normal play?
That's a big question. I would say that we always want to err on the side of, again, we're looking into it, we're investigating. And anytime you have a complaint, we're investigating what went on and then determining based on the facts whether it was play or bullying.
Anything else? Guess we'll come back. Consent calendar. H7, discussion of course equivalents to Santa Barbara City College.
Dr. Drotti will present this item.
Good evening again, Governing Board. For students attending community college as special part-time students, credit shall be at a level jointly determined by the Board of Education and the Community College Governing Board. Presented before the board is Santa Barbara Unified School Districts, Santa Barbara Unified School Districts and Santa Barbara City College's recommended course equivalence alignment for discussion. The last time I brought this course equivalence to you, you gave some recommendations for staff to consider. I took it back to discuss with staff and also cabinet, and at that point it was determined that what you see before you is the most logical and fairest equivalence direction we want to bring forward. With that, I'll open it up for more discussion.
Ms. Idelson?
Go first. I really feel this push to change the equivalency of these courses to 10 credits to meet grad requirements very troubling. I do not think we should give 10 credits because I don't think it benefits the students. I have not seen this as a common practice at other high school districts, and if you want to point out a good number of them that do this, I'd be interested in that. Our schools are they're public high schools, and they feed into public UCs and CSUs, And the policy of the University of California states it allows one semester community college course to clear a one-year A to G requirement, but it counts the class as only one semester A to G course. And this UC treatment is consistent with how our district's past policy was on AR 6146.1, and that, I believe, was mistakenly deleted in June 12th, 2012, because we have language that says exactly what I'm stating, that the course equivalents from the one semester course will be equivalent to meeting that one-year requirement. I just don't feel we want students going down the road of getting 10 credits for a one semester course time, and then when they go to apply to a college that expects rigor and, you know, a application packed with A to G courses, they've lost. And they've lost time there. So I strongly feel that this is not the direction we want to go. 5 credits for all the years up until this last year that I've had children in the district taking City College courses, dual enrollment, has been very satisfactory for meeting the requirements. I'd be curious what other board members feel.
Yes.
Ms. Limon?
I would like to understand the genesis of this. If you
Yes.
could just speak a little bit more to that and why the committee or the group is suggesting 10.
Yeah, to provide context, and I'm very familiar with the board policy that Mrs. Idelson described. Obviously, I wasn't here at that time when that language was struck out. The language, the board policy we currently have does not address that language. The reason why there's a change in direction in terms of the number of credits we give our students is the formula by which we are aligning our courses had to do with the actual description of the courses. So if a student is taking a year's worth of English at City College, and which is compressed in a semester, we want to give that student a year's worth of credit, what we would give to our English students here. So if you're taking English 10, let's pick on English 12. If you're taking English 12 in our district, you would take a year's worth of English. But the same curriculum, scope and sequence, course objectives, if it's taught at City College, it will be taught in what we call a semester. But we thought it was fair to give that student that's taking it at City College the actual 10 credits we will give with our district course.
And so if that happens, then that also means that students, I mean, does that change their time to degree? Does that change the fact that now they are earning more units, so therefore they can actually finish earlier? What kinds of implications does that have for the student and for us to think about if we're thinking about ADA, if we're thinking about the number of the minutes per day that they're on campus?
Yes.
What kind of implications does this have?
Yeah, for our students, in order for us to collect the ADA and as far as agreement is concerned, they have to be in our district a certain amount of time anyway. They can't, so they would have to fill that course with some kind of elective that they would take from our course.
So this would not basically have
Yes.
more students finish in 3.5 years as opposed to 4 years?
No.
No.
They could try.
Could try,
They
right?
can try, yes.
Well, and I'm just wondering what other implications, I mean, that this might have that we should consider.
Well, I think the issue really is that those students who, for reasons related, I would say, to their own personal economics, don't have an opportunity to take a class at City College, would be taking the course equivalent within our course catalog and earning 10 credits. And so, I mean, it should be treated the same. I understand the rationale behind the proposal by staff, and it's not just Dr. Drotti, it was
the assistant principals and head counselors of each.
And then also Santa Barbara City College staff.
And I want to add, I know Mrs. Adelson's point is of students having the opportunity to take more A through G courses is noted. And I think in our conversations, we acknowledge that, yes, students can still continue to take city college courses. We're not stopping anybody from not taking them. The students that are motivated to continue to take more A through G courses through City College still have the ability to do that.
Yeah, because we don't have a cap like colleges do. Once you reach a certain credit limit, you're kicked out.
Ms. Parker?
A few things. One is, this is a decision that is made with the governing board.
Yes.
Jointly with the Santa Barbara City College, and so I haven't seen what they've seen. I don't know where the current policy is. They have some of their policies online now, which is an improvement, but not all of them. So I don't know where their governing board discussion has been on this in the past, and so I'd be curious to find that out.
Yes, yes.
The other piece is, I don't understand why, like for example with math, if it's about one semester being a year's worth, why is it that probably the two lowest level math classes, 107, 111, are 10 units of credit where everything else is 5? So I just don't understand that. And then I guess, yes, so in looking at that, if you're going to, why wouldn't they all be 10 if it's about what it would be if it's a year-long course that you're condensing into a semester? But I also want to get to the point of what Ms. Idelson was saying about what students are taking and the number of credits that they have available. The reality is that with our counselors' caseloads, they don't focus on college applications. They don't. They do what they can, but it's not something that I would consider our staff have the capacity to spend a lot of time on. And I'm really concerned, because I hear this coming up again and again in other areas, that our students don't understand that if they only take this class that they're getting years worth of credit for in Santa Barbara Unified, that a private college, that a public four-year institution are going to look at it as if they took one semester of math. And so I want to be cautious that we're not doing a disservice to our students by having them think that that is going to put them in the same as the student that went in and took Math 150 and Math 130 is in the same place as one that just took Math 107. Yeah. They're not. Yeah. And so I worry about that as well. And finally, my third point is, I want to know what the graduation committee has had, and I don't know that you've met yet.
No, we have a meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, I believe.
Yeah, so that'll be informative as well.
Yeah. In terms of why some of those courses are 5 credits and not others, like I said, we focus strictly on the objectives taught. We compared it with the objectives taught with the classes at City College and in our district. So if you look at, say, trigonometry, normally trigonometry is a semester. In our system, it's not a years-long course. It's a semester. So the course equivalent for that was identified with Math 138 at City College because it covered the same objectives. If you look at Math 150, and Math 130, the objectives covered there would actually be half that credit. So, to your point, I would have to look at that calculus, the 2 calculus components, because we know that we take calculus for a year here. So, I imagine that probably has to be 10 credits.
So in theory, if somebody at Santa Barbara High School takes a year-long class, they would get 10 credits.
Yes.
But if that same student went to City College and took a one-semester class, as long as the objectives and content was the same, they would only get
5.
5 units.
Yes.
And so the theory is, I guess if a student couldn't get to City College to take a class,
yes,
they would be at a disadvantage because other people in their class would be getting 10 credits for the same class that they're getting 5 credits for.
Yes.
And so you have an economic aspect also to it.
Yes.
Well, I'll say Dos Pueblos. How do people from Dos Pueblos go to City College? And
Yeah, so I looked at those numbers.
Well, most of the classes they take are on campus. So there's a big difference between being able to get to the campus and take a straight City College class, because dual enrollment courses offered on our campus are given our credits. So if somebody took a dual enrollment course on our campus, they would get our credits.
We would get 10.
Ed? I
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
say, though, the courses that were selected for the 10 credit on this list, I don't believe any of those, except possibly a foreign language, are the ones taught on the campuses. So that's puzzling, given what Dr. Cash just mentioned. But I think as a district, we've taken away, we've gone from 240 credits required for graduation to 220 credits.
Yes.
This is, if this proposal were to happen, it's really degrading the graduation requirement even further by doing this, because Ed, as you mentioned, a student, yes, would take that one semester and get 10 credits, and then could take something else. I mean, it inflates the credits, presumably, by adding this another 5 credits to the semester course.
I think it creates equity for those students who can't afford to get to City College to take classes.
What will happen is, as you take City College courses, I mean, you're essentially freed up a semester.
Right.
So our course, the City College courses offered at our sites are limited. So the students that have access to City College have access to more courses they can fill up that schedule with.
And they can still do that whether they get 5 credits or 10 credits.
For, I think, so it sounds like this is also going to go to the graduation committee. Can we get a breakdown of the numbers? Like, who are we talking about that is not, how many of our students are not taking classes, how many of our students are taking classes at San Barbara City College as opposed to here? Because it sounds like it's not really an issue of those that take it here on campus. And if we could get demographics of that, that would be very helpful, because I think I'm hearing some talks in a little bit in abstract, like of who this could potentially impact, but I think that would be useful to see, to understand who we're really talking about that takes classes at the community college as opposed to taking advantage of dual enrollment on our campus.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
How do they teach in one semester what we teach in a year? I mean, what is the makeup of the student that can do it in a semester and cover the same material and grasp the same material?
It's the same concept as San Marcos' block schedule. I mean, there's longer time in the class for students to take that curriculum. At San Marcos, their years actually in a traditional semester of a.
Okay.
So the same concept.
Anything else? Good, thank you. Good discussion. We will now go to item that was pulled from the agenda, E10, Kate Parker, approval of the Wolf Science Camp contract for 15-16 school year.
I pulled that because it's actually a huge change. We've been going to an outdoor science camp for 6th graders, either district paid or site paid, for many decades. In fact, I think Ms. Limon went. And so it's a huge change, and I want to be sure that the public is aware of it, certainly, but I would also like to hear more specifically about this rather than just having the, just the written document as we talk about this change for the coming year.
Good evening again, Board President, Board. Specifically, the Wolf partnership or potential partnership emerged last spring, and my understanding is that some discussions were had as we look to transition into NGSS, into a new set of standards. And Wolf offered us an opportunity to take what has traditionally been a wonderful experience, capstone experience for our 6th grade students, which I might add wasn't prior to, I want to say last year, wasn't necessarily shared by all students. I think that was one of the intent, or that was perhaps maybe one of the primary intents of bringing it into the LCAP, was to ensure some degree of equity in terms of the experience. So as that discussion evolved, this was a next iteration of that, is to look at the activities that have become really a huge part of the experience, and take it one step further to look at how they align to the experiences that students should be encountering as part of the new standards.
One question I had is, this is a first year with Wolf, and am I correct in this is located down in the Simi Valley area?
Correct. The Brandeis site is, so I'm actually very excited about this. I haven't had a chance to visit it myself, but I will find a time to go down there. But one of the appeals...
should actually attend for one of them, Mr. Ramirez.
I would love to attend for 5 full days. But beyond that, I think...
6th grader in a few years.
There you go.
I'll have plenty of opportunities for that. But no, beyond that, one of the appeals for Wolf is that this is a fully renovated facility. It is an enclosed facility. It's a facility that many schools in Ventura County, and in fact here in our own, have had an opportunity to attend. And so that was a big appeal. That it gave us an opportunity to experience something new in terms of just the facility alone. Beyond that, yes, it is in Simi Valley, the Brandeis site. It is in Simi Valley, and it's also from everything that I hear, it's got some Hollywood connections. Some filming has happened down there in that area as well. So it's pretty historic, or it's got a historical background, and as well as just really renovated facilities that we hope give our students an even better experience.
Well, I'm also hoping that teachers, especially teachers that have experienced both, will give us some sort of systematic feedback.
Yes, so that was one of the things in terms of my transition. I heard about this transition from 6th grade teachers, and they had a lot of questions way back in June during our professional learning week. I was able to hear their thoughts. We, over the summer into what was late June, August, we had extensive dialogue and communication with the executive director of the camp. He was very forthcoming, gave us this information, has been willing to work with us, and has been very much in the loop. He also met with the 6th grade team, the 6th grade PLC, on August 21st, at which point they were able to ask him a lot of questions, really, that ran the gamut from those that were specific to a site to those that concerned the entire PLC. So my understanding is that the communication has been really positive, and absolutely we're going to be looking for opportunities for feedback as our sites begin to experience this as early as October. We have 2 sites, Cleveland and Adams, that will be there in mid-October.
And are parents being notified about this as on a like site-by-site basis just through the 6th grade teachers, or is it more systematic?
So similar to the way that it was done before, parents are welcome to attend, and there's and the staff, the Wolf staff, has agreed to participate in those discussions with parents as they hear more about the camp and the facilities and the experiences that the kids will take on. As you know, every year there's a new crop of parents that are nervous and excited and everything in between that at the opportunity of having their children or their child attend. And so they have, as was customary and has been customary, to establish nights when there's a Q&A or an informational night pertaining to the experience, and they've offered to be a part of those and be there to hear the parents' comments, concerns, ideas, and also to provide a more complete view of the camp experience.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Adelson?
Will there be, also, all my kids attended the Rancho Alegre camp, and I'm looking here at the overview of where Brandeis is, and it's, I'm sure, a pretty wild area, but it doesn't have a lake, from what I can see. There's things missing that the kids, when they would go over the pass and have the camp experience.
There's no lake there either now.
No, that's true. But, the hawks would soar close by. I mean, it definitely was a very special experience, and I would hope that this, granted, maybe even better, but were it not, that we'd revisit the other, if possible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there'll be a good evaluation of how this compares.
Yes, and we're still looking at what that would look like in terms of a survey for teachers. We still look at what that might look like. We're also going to keep in mind the anecdotal, the information that might come back from parents or from teachers and students in this case as well. We suspect that it's going to be a great experience. My understanding is that pool access is there is a pool on site. It's not something that has been built into the schedule, and probably not something that would be per se, but just so you know that there is that facility or that as part of the facility.
And I just have one question. You spoke a little bit about how the decision was made. So who exactly made the decision? And it sounds like teachers were included, or was it just all sixth grade teachers, just PLC leaders? How can you talk a little bit about how the decision was made?
I really can't. I wish I could give you a full rundown. That happened sometime in mid to late spring, and I know that by the time that I transitioned into my role, that was something that I was able to just continue to work through. But what I can say is that a number of questions were raised in June where teachers felt like they wanted more information. They wanted to make sure that a lot of the things that they had grown accustomed to would continue. And so we worked very diligently. I worked with Ms. Casey Kilgore, who is the principal aligned to our sixth grade PLC and has established really strong connections with them to meet with the camp executive director over the summer to compile information about all of their questions. So they were able to submit, teachers were able to submit questions to us that we then answered and articulated even before they came on board in August. So we were able to appeal to a lot of the questions and comments that they had made, and then again, that was the purpose of having the executive director come to speak to them directly, to ensure that they felt comfortable with the change in venue, and just this experience really wasn't one that all teachers could speak to be very frank. Not all school sites attended last year. I would have to go back and revisit our records, but I know for a fact that there were 2 sites, I believe, that didn't attend last year.
So it is your understanding or your feeling that at this point now, with the process that's taken place, with the feedback, the executive director coming, that teachers feel comfortable with this decision moving forward?
The feedback that I've received has been very positive. Of course, as with any change, there's always some doubt or some questions that linger. But I did reassure the teachers time and again that we would evaluate this year. And we're putting our best foot forward with this new partnership. And if there's cause for concern or cause to look back to our previous vendor, we certainly will keep the door open for that.
And price-wise, is this comparable or comparable to the last one? Is this, yes?
Yes, it's within budget. And that was something where they were also very flexible in ensuring that their program fit within our budget.
Well, I do look forward to seeing the feedback. I hope it's feedback from teachers, from parents, and students as well. Just, I mean, satisfaction, you can't compare if they didn't go to the other one, but satisfaction if they like it or not.
Sure.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
No, oh, that's, yeah, okay. I'll make a motion that we approve the Wolf Wilderness Outdoor School for this year. Is that the?
Second.
Under discussion further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Okay, we will now go to coming events. I think Dr. Cash mentioned the meeting with Goleta School Board and the State of the Education coming up October 1st. Anything else? Future agenda items? Ms. Idelson?
I'd like to bring back the AR 6146.1.
A1,
6146.1.
Point 1. Bring it back for discussion?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Cash, I think we had a communication. Is the science coming back to us soon? The science integrated versus?
Yes, it's either on the next board agenda or the one following.
Okay. And just an update for the board. 2 weeks ago, we had the discussion about alcohol on campus, and Dr. Cash did talk to the principals, and from what he tells me, it was pretty much unanimous almost to not allow alcohol on the campuses. So
all but one.
All but one. So my preference at the moment, I'll just let you know, is to not bring it back on the agenda. Okay. And if anybody would like it further, they can get a hold of me. We can talk about it. Okay. I think go home.